I'd like to call this meeting to order with a reminder that the actions taken this evening will focus on our students and their achievement. With that, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
It's been moved by Dave, seconded by Susan. Any discussion about the consent agenda? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you. Item C on the agenda is public comment. I have not been contacted about talking this evening.
Either way.
All right. We're to item D already on the agenda, and
It is certainly our honor to have Representative Kresick and Senator Danielson with us this evening. Thank you so much for coming as you prepare not only for the holidays but also for the upcoming legislative session. Certainly this is it's an opportunity to really just have a conversation and dialogue. As a school board and school district, we certainly have the same interest as you do, to have strong schools, strong communities, and strong partnerships so we can work collectively together as we look to the future. So really, the thought tonight was certainly just to have a dialogue, a conversation regarding some of your thoughts on the upcoming session. We did hand out, or at your spots, are the legislative priorities, not only from ISAB, which is the first page back to back, and then also the UEN legislative priorities, which is the packet of information, roughly about 12 pages. And there were some extra copies up on the table as well for those in the audience. I think there were 10 to 12 copies up there.
I printed out my own copies and did my homework, so I got an extra copy.
That's good.
Neither did test.
So again, the thought would be just to talk about the thoughts on the upcoming legislative session and some of the priorities you think might be on the docket potentially for education and the impact on education.
Absolutely. Every good senator knows to let their representative go first.
Well, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to come here tonight. There was a few years that we didn't come, and I think it's worthwhile for us to have a relationship, partnership on topics, issues dealing with K-12 ed. And, you know, I probably said this to, I know Jeff's heard this, but it's really the summary of the legislative process.
We're roommates too, by the way.
From a budget.
11 years.
Yeah, we do really three things at the state. We educate, we medicate, and we incarcerate. You know, when you take those three items together, that's 90% of our state budget. The K-12 system and our post-secondary piece take up a major share of that funding. I would say that I went to a meeting with the Cedar Valley Alliance and they talked about the sunset on the local option. And then I looked at the comments that were from the UEN dealing with that. And from what I can see, it sounds like that you'd like to eliminate the sunset. You would like to see it continue, the 1 cent penny. And I did some looking into that, and it sounds like the idea of just removing the sunset probably isn't going to work. You know, to say that you get to your 20 years, it would continue, you know, with, it's probably not going to work, so I think it would require the full removal of the sunset. And so I'm working on that. I'm working on some bill drafts. I do know that there's like a rule, I think it's the Rural School Advocates. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're also, you know, asking for that. And in part, the bonding piece that you deal with, you know, you're into this 6-year process, and then 14 years left on that. The bonding companies kind of look at you like, well, how are you going to be able to do it? The sunset occurs. So I think there's real energy to make that happen this session. And I know with you guys coming, UEN, the rural advocates are going to be a key piece. So I'm wanting to work with you on that. I'm working with LSA and staff to see what we can get created. And definitely a bipartisan, group, Representative Jorgensen, I guess, is chair of that budget committee again, and so I'll be talking to him and seeing what his thoughts are. The allowable growth, I just would share that, under Iowa law, it states in there that we convene the legislative body, the governor comes in and makes his speech, and then 30 days after that, we are to set allowable growth. And for some reason, the House chose not to set allowable growth, and it was pretty disappointing. I know that the Speaker of the House was asked, so you're not doing that, what other laws are you going to break? That didn't go over well with him, but my sense is to allowable growth that something is going to happen this year. You folks, along with others, you probably talked to your legislator to let them know how troubling that 0% allowable growth was. And, Cedar Falls, we're a growing district, but some of your rural communities, it's a real struggle for them to, and really, in a sense, if we set allowable growth and help schools out, it helps with not raising taxes here locally. And I know that that's a big issue for a lot of people in the area. I would say that mental health is a big issue. We did a redesign, I think a couple years ago, and there's some real issues with the redesign because, quite honest with you, we don't have the resources to treat the mental health issues. And children, okay, K-12, most of those kids end up having to be set out of state to deal with, their mental health issues because we don't have those services here. And so then you have this issue of separation of family, the child comes back, problems exist, and they go back. And I know that you folks are, particularly teachers in the K-12 system, are dealing with these issues. And hopefully we can find resources to give you the tools to help these kids out. And I think that to me is so important that, these young people, if we don't do something with them at that age, what happens? They get out of school, they get in trouble with the law, and then we're paying for it anyway, through the correction systems and that. I think it makes sense that we do that. Iowa Core, I just want to share that, there are some folks at the Capitol that have this kind of Agenda 21 fear that government's taking over the world and Common Core is not a good thing. Well, I disagree with them. I think Common Core is some guidelines, and you really here in this school district, you've allowed the teachers to kind of establish what that core is. It's a list of subjects we think are important for students to utilize and learn. So Common Core is, I think, going forward. You might hear some criticisms here or there, but by and large, I think the planning, the concept, and the education with Common Core, all those things are moving our education system forward. And we'll see. Preschool, today I had an opportunity with Senator Danielson. We did a tour of child care facilities it was Waterloo. We went to Hawkeye Tech, or Hawkeye Community College, I guess. I'm dating myself here a little bit. But we went to the facilities, got a chance to see, all the things that are really happening with that pre-K element. The biggest need right now is the infant stages. They're really struggling to find people to offer that care, and it's pretty limited. So I'm sure some of you probably already heard that. But I would like to see more opportunities for us here, whether it's in the setting here or it's privately done. But, you know, I just would say that from an economic development perspective, you know, the state of Iowa is kind of struggling with the skilled worker piece. We're getting, you know, the baby boom generation moving forward, retirement, and now we have to replace those skilled jobs with, and so it's kind of a struggle for us. We're working on it at the state level, but I think if we can make sure that there's pre-K education, care for young people, it's going to help parents. Iowa is really one of the leading states where the two-parent household incomes are needed. And so I think that's kind of the whole thing. I don't know the committees I serve on. For some reason, they haven't gotten that back to us yet, but in the past, I've served on Commerce, ranking member of Public Safety, and local government. I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission here for a few years. And then I did economic development budgets where we worked on funding for various statewide programs regarding economic development. The session starts January 12th. It's actually by code the second Monday in January. And this year is 110 days. So there's plenty of opportunity for you to come down there. And I know I've seen some of you down there before. So that's kind of my summary. And I would share, and Jeff's probably going to talk about it too, the gas tax is getting some discussions. I saw Governor Branstad came out with this comment that he's leaning favorable to a proposal, but that's a long ways from saying that he is supportive of gas tax. So, you know, there's arguments on both sides of that. You know, incomes, your retired fixed incomes, it's a challenge. So, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions.
I've got a quick question for you, just more to get your input for being in Des Moines so long. It seems like with the allowable growth that you get frustrated with Republicans because they'll say 0, but I get frustrated with Democrats because they always say 6. And there's always the give and take in between there. And then it becomes a political football that doesn't get passed within those 30 days that it's supposed to. And it directly affects the district, not only just in terms of how much will we have for allowable growth in terms of the money or the revenue, but it leads so much further down. I'm on the committee for the negotiations. And so it bothers the negotiations, it bothers for the planning and all that. I guess, is there some way to come together within those 30 days and just start off at 3 and maybe stick with 3 or 2 or 4,
Right.
that kind of thing?
Well, I do know last session was pretty unique from my experience. There was no discussions in the House on allowable growth, other than ones that we tried to present on the floor, and they weren't taken up. So last session there was a, what's the word they're using now for allowable growth?
State supplemental aid.
State supplemental aid. That's their
That ought to tell you
concept.
something in and of itself.
They're trying to change how the funding works. Well, that's fine if we're going to have a discussion about how that change is going to occur, but currently we have allowable growth. We weren't able to have any discussion in the House. The Senate passed a measure, but it was never taken up in the House. So my sense is that they want to move forward with this new program, but I'll be honest with you, and I would think all of you, if you had some program in the K-12 setting here at Cedar Falls, you would want input from folks on that issue. We haven't had any discussions on what the new plan is. So I think from my perspective, we've done allowable growth in the past. We've done 4, we've done 2, we've done 6. I think we've done 6. It's been a while, but so yeah, and you know, I'll be honest with you, I'm more than willing to work with any of them down there, and I think they know that. But leadership and others have kind of decided to go that direction. So, and it's hurting schools. You know, I think, what did I see here? That we're $1,657 below the national average on states on supplemental aid. It's a lot of money. You know, and I know you folks all recognize that that's probably one of your biggest pieces here, because you got buildings to heat, you got staff to pay, teachers, you know, it's a big part of that. And so I would hope that more folks get a chance to talk to folks like you and really get an understanding of the mechanism. You know, how does this all work? Well, you know, kids that live in Cedar Falls, they're going to go to school, so we're going to have school. You know, I don't know what the other alternative is. Are we going to just not do anything? I don't think that's a good direction. So the reality is, funding from the state is a big part of that, and I hope that you can maybe convince others that have not supported that, that they need to move in that direction.
Thanks.
I have a question for both of you, and it's not a rhetorical question. I would like if you can give advice to us what we should be doing. So there's a lot to debate about the Common Core, a lot of legitimate debate to be had. But when I hear some legislators talk, they're complaining about like specific pedagogies and techniques which have absolutely nothing to do with what the Common Core is. There's this breach between what the Common Core actually says and what Facebook forwards say it says. And so what we've done, first of all, I mean, it's
Try to
Google,
sort it out
you
during
Google
the
the Common
campaign.
Core.
Yeah.
And what the school district has done is we have links, you can get to the Common Core from our website. Is there anything more we can do as a district to help inform legislators actually what it is the Common Core is, so at least we can argue about it at a higher level?
Both of your questions have been very perceptive.
They're awesome.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome to come down and see the characters we have to deal with. I'd be happy to introduce you to them and start the conversation. But I think, first of all, you have to ratchet down the rhetoric around the Iowa Core. There are people who have conspiracy theories about it. I don't agree with them. I actually think they shift the attention away from what the Iowa Core is, which is basically minimum standards with measurement. Right?
I mean, you read them, they're not even that controversial.
Right, and we stayed away from specifically outlining lesson plans and all the other things. That's your job. Here's the goals, meet them, and with some measurement. And you know, we're probably not doing as well as we need to do on the measurement side. There's 2 or 3 different tests out there, and it'd be nice if we figured out which one we want to use and kind of stick with it. So, Doug, I don't share the conspiracy theorists' thoughts of this. Iowa was the last state to adopt minimum standards with some measurement, even though we, you know, tend to do very well on our college entrance exams and relative to our peers around the country, our education system stacks up well. But it was time to have some uniformity, some minimum standards with measurement. That's what it is. Whatever else other folks are conjuring up in their minds, if you'd like to come down and help them understand the basics of it, we'd love to have the help. But I frankly don't put a lot of stock in what's going on the internet around this issue, because I think it either scares people or uses misinformation. It's not really what it's about. We should be more thoughtful than that.
Yeah, and I would just share that in my conversations with those people that think that, when you get into giving them the understanding of what really Common Core is, they look at you like, well, we didn't know that. You know, it's being portrayed as this evil device. It's another tool that government has implemented that will eventually end up removing your rights and liberties as Americans, because you'll be brainwashed, you'll become liberals or you know, whatever. Yeah, I mean, literally that's really the fear, you know, that they have with that. And You know, I've always said that facts are a stubborn thing. And that's what they need to learn, what the facts are on this. It's truly a process for us to improve our skills. And skills today aren't the same when I went to school. You know, I had a gentleman one day, I was door knocking, he would say, oh, I remember when I went to school, God, we just had a single stove there and a blackboard, and by God, look at me, I made it all right. And I thought, well, sir, you know, things have changed significantly. Yeah, so
Debate's already been had, the governor
Yeah.
supports
I think
the
that's the
minimum
key.
standards with the measurements. Most members of the legislature support what we've done. The debate's been had. It's, you know, if there's adjustments, improvements, we'll always consider those, but the bulk of the debate about whether Iowa would adopt minimum standards with measurements is already.
Does every legislator have an actual copy of it?
There, it's available to them, Doug, but you have 150 different people, with different backgrounds, different experiences, and it's up to them to apply their own thought process to how they arrive at their decisions, and if you'd like to try sorting that out, we'll give you plenty of time and opportunity. It's the stuff of the legislature, right? People have a lot of different views and opinions, and on this one, in my view, the debate has been had. Iowa will come into the 21st century with minimum standards and measurements. And it's our job to make sure that we're communicating with you that they're valid, that they are something you can implement, and that we can learn from those results down the road so that we can all improve. And then our kids have better opportunities to have a better future. That's the basic argument. I like that argument. I'll continue to use it. And let others kind of make their own case, I suppose.
One of the things that I've heard, and it's on page 11, I think, is kind of the response that as educators we use, deals with the statewide 1 cent penny sunset. One hope is, as we all know, we have some infrastructure challenges that we've discussed the district for 5 to 7 years, and that 1 cent sunset would certainly help us on this as we look towards the facility planning and facility work, because it eliminates property tax increases, or at least cuts that down. That last sentence really is something that's kind of come out the last few months where people talk. If that opens up, can we start using that 1 cent penny then for other infrastructure challenges, roadways, DNR, other public buildings, not school buildings, but other public buildings, be able to use that 1 cent penny for those purposes. And one of the things that I even had a conversation with a couple people at the state the other day, and just said, well, you know, the schools in all counties, 99 counties across the state, pass that 1 cent sales tax for one specific purpose, and that was for school infrastructure. So the challenge would be, yes, we could share that penny, but I think the expectation would be then that entity or those entities would need to go around to all 99 counties and get that 1 cent sales. If you want any part of a 1 cent penny, please go and get it passed in all 99 counties. We very much encourage you to do that, then you can have a second penny for the purpose of whatever you want.
Oh, yeah, yes, I get you.
Yeah.
It's sort of like the road, the 1%
Sure.
road tax.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it's a perennial argument, right? The slippery slope. We generally don't use that as logic and thinking, but tends to work in campaigns and everything else. But not when you're trying to make rational decisions about how to pay for a 20 or 30-year project down the road. So on the sunset, there's some precedent for us changing similar laws. We did it with the gaming referendum a couple of years ago. We found that they were passing 80–85%. The same considerations, you're bonding for 20 and 30 years, yet you're in doubt every 6, in this case 8 for the gaming legislation. So you have some precedent in probably a more controversial area of policy, where we have repealed some of the follow-on referendums. So look at that. There's also always reverse referendum options under the code. So if somebody has a slippery slope arguments and there's enough evidence a particular area of Iowa is not honoring the original promise, you've got reverse referendum options already on the books. And you would also point out that school districts do not have home rule authority, which makes it much, much harder for you to make unilateral decisions and much easier for the public to engage and adjust your course. So there's accountability with the voters with the way you're set up, in my view. It would lend itself to eliminating that extra vote once you know there's a track record of support.
Yeah.
Certainly, most Iowans do not want to put districts in a bad financial position, having obligated for a 20-year bond and 14 years of that's in doubt. Once you explain to people that, that scenario, there's plenty of accountability, and we're trying to actually manage the money better, which is in their best interest too, then most people understand why we would look at a policy like that. So I'd be happy to help. I manage that other piece for the gaming referendum, and had the ability to talk to people about why it was important, and we actually did it. And there wasn't a single headline about it, so happy to help.
That's great.
I agree, the point, that's what the voters voted for.
That's right.
That's what was voted,
Yep.
to use it
Right.
It's the bait and switch scenarios
That's
that
right.
they're fearful of, and rightfully so don't do that, right? And build in some accountability.
Yeah, I think TIF was another example of a project that was created and had been used responsibly. Then we had a couple bad players that probably didn't do it as wisely as they should have. And then we had to come back in and adjust some of the language in the TIF process. So like tax incremental financing, I'm sure you guys all know about that. But I think that Jeff did that pretty well on the discussion.
If you would like, I'd offer a few thoughts. It was good to launch into questions. I like that. Probably better than stump speeches. But just to give you a little bit of context for what my thoughts are in the session, first of all, my committees. I chair state government, which deals with all these wonderful subjects that everybody just agrees with: gambling, alcohol, pensions, professional licensing, elections, campaign finance, and darn near anything else that doesn't fit anywhere else. So it tends to be a lot of different subjects for which you have to be thoughtful and sort through in order to have a good policy on those areas. I'm vice chair of 3 committees: appropriations, Veterans Affairs, having served in the Navy for 6 years, and then I'm vice chair of admin and reg budget, which is as boring and bureaucratic as a name you can give a budget committee. It's actually administration and regulation budget joint subcommittee is the title, but it covers about 25 different state agencies, including the governor's office itself, all the other offices that nobody cares about until something goes wrong. And then I'm a member of economic growth and the transportation. As a sidebar, those 2 committees, economic growth, will probably deal with the broadband bill again, try to increase our speeds around Iowa, even places that need it, and improve it where they already are close to a high speed. And then obviously the road use tax fund debate that we're going to have. I think there's a window of opportunity, a recognition that we are trying to have a 21st century transportation system and paying for it with 20th century money. Those revenues have not been adjusted since 1989. I was sailing in the Navy in the Pacific on my first deployment back then, all was 18 years old. So we think it's time to readjust, and it won't be just a straight gas tax debate. There'll be other discussions about sales tax that can be used for road use and still constitutionally protected. A couple of the issues we already talked about: minimum standards with measurement, otherwise known as the Iowa Core. I'm supportive of it. We'll make adjustments and improvements as we go along, especially for the school districts. There may be an opportunity under the school transportation funding piece to piggyback on the road use tax debate. If there is a known new revenue that's going to be generated from that, I think you should participate in the discussion about transportation funding. As a sidebar on transportation, I'm also going to work on allowing maintenance and repair for transportation equipment under PEPL. When you look at the fleet management policies, they're very different than short-term purchases that most people think about when it comes to why we've excluded this from PEPL in the past, right? You manage a fleet over a number of years. That's much different than an individual car purchase that a consumer would make. And therefore, thought in the past has been not to water down the Pebble purchases for bricks and mortar, and et cetera. But the reality is you make a same purchase decision for your fleet decisions over a long period of time. So to me, from a public finance concept, it fits. We'll be working on that. I think there's a lot of districts that have needed that. It's been almost impossible to, for example, swap out an engine, which is a fairly high cost, because it's not authorized, and yet you just have to purchase the whole vehicle again. And so that's kind of silly. Most Iowans wouldn't say that's what the position that we want to put you in. So related to that, we will probably work on that as well. We touched preschool. Keep in mind, it was 4 years ago when a fairly well-known governor with a lot of tenure proposed eliminating that completely, and thankfully it was in standings appropriations for which it couldn't be removed without a positive vote. We negotiated throughout that session and saved most of the early childhood funding. I doubt you'll see increases, but at least it's been preserved, and we saw the good work in this area. Somebody mentioned that Waterloo provides a day calendar for their early childhood, and that perhaps Cedar Falls was more geared towards a half-a-day service. If that's not the case, hopefully you can clarify that tonight, because it sounded to be a constructive critique of what you guys do, and so if we can learn something about that, it would be helpful. AEAs, here's what I don't understand about those who don't think AEAs are valuable. If you don't have an AEA, and you still have all the regulations, especially for students with disabilities, which we should, because they tend to get lost in the shuffle, and it's a very expensive service to provide. If you don't have an AEA for that, school districts are going to have to create that on their own anyways. So we get roll-up effects, efficiencies of economies if you've got AEAs who can come in and provide those supplemental services, so you don't have to pay for all the back-end overhead. But it's been difficult for people to understand that concept, and AEAs have done what I think is a good job over the years of consolidating where they thought they needed to, kind of expanding and growing with how school districts are faced with those declining enrollments as well. So, you know, they've adjusted. Let's let them continue their work. It doesn't look like you're proposing anything specifically, but maybe more of a support resolution. I know Rourke in this area very well. He's a capable professional. He's done a good job with the resources we provided, and so I still support it. I was a student in first grade who had to have AEA services. I couldn't say my S's very well. And so I still remember being with a speech therapist from AEA over at Kittrell in one of the rooms, take you out of the classroom, and we would practice my S's. And I still remember the day she said, "You don't have to come see me anymore. You can say your S's." So in that sense, it's a fairly minor issue that I had, but when we look at some of the issues that we're having with younger students, especially with all the other things that go on outside the classroom, the AEAs are helping us get those students ready with professional services that they need. So if you don't want them to do it, you're going to end up rebuilding it all back into the school districts for much higher overhead from a statewide perspective. And to me, that would be silly. And that dovetails on the mental health piece. Finish with supplemental state aid, and be happy to answer any questions on any subjects, really. We should probably talk a little bit about the state budget as well, because that affects the asks. It shouldn't be lost on you that the allowable growth chapter in the code, both the governor and the Iowa House leadership wants to change that from the phrasing of allowable growth to supplemental state aid. Allowable growth had always historically been the first big money decision that the legislators would make in the Capitol. That's why you have the timelines built in. Governor gives a speech, 30 days later, we say, with the kind of new money that we're anticipating because of the revenue estimating conference, we're going to commit first to our local schools. It should not be lost on you that that whole paradigm has been changed. I don't support it. I think we should honor our tradition that education is the first investment in Iowa. That's why we have it on the state quarter. It's why we've been successful here and around the world, and some of the sharpest, best students You get good outcomes for that money, I don't know why you would want to jeopardize it. But, there you have it. And it has become a tit for tat, and I wish it weren't. But the Senate just caucused yesterday, so Tuesday or Monday? Sunday, so yesterday we just had our caucus. And the Senate will offer 6% allowable growth. And we will then, you know, hopefully negotiate with our colleagues on the other side of the chamber. Keep in mind, they are a constitutionally independent body. They don't have to listen to the Senate if they don't want to, and they've been fairly clear about that. But we think, if you look at the last 4 years, for the first time in Iowa history, local schools have been goose egg. 0 on allowable growth for 2 years out of the last 4. Compare that to the 1980s, during the farm crisis, when you could argue was probably one of the worst fiscal times that we've ever seen. Never 0 the local schools, even during the farm crisis. And when you couple it with the fact that the last 4 years have been fairly healthy revenues, growth, the largest surpluses in Iowa history, the financial facts don't fit that outcome. So we've got a challenge to convince people in the Capitol that we need to stop this, commit to funding our schools first. Whatever improvements you tend to argue for that money, make them. We don't think the schools are opposed to improving and innovating. You guys have clearly shown it. But don't use it as a lever to say we're not going to provide the funding until you somehow, you know, scream uncle. And I don't think that's a good strategy for success long term. But that's the challenge. So maybe after the campaign fever is broken and we all get back to the session and look at what our opportunities are to invest in Iowans, we put especially local schools first again and have that conversation. A little bit about the budget. About 3 hours ago, the Fiscal Legislative Services Agency, which is our nonpartisan advisors, so not Democrats and Republicans, our paid staff, objective third-party staff who gives us that information, put out there what's basically the state of Iowa's budget. So it's hot off the presses about 3 hours ago. There's one chart in there that I think you need to take a look at. It's the reserves that we normally use to help balance the budget at the end. So it's actually the retained reserves, not our rainy day funds. That is on a nosedive. And since supplemental state aid / allowable growth is actually a 2-year obligation, that chart's very important to you because it indicates what we're going to have for resources. And they're declining. So keep that in mind as you go forward. I still think we can provide, based on current growth, the kind of supplemental state aid that we've expected in the past, 4 to 6%. Not the last 4 years, but historical trends that were kind of reasonable. So the money is still there to do that. It'll be tight, it'll be difficult, but again, budgets are about priorities. And we, as a state, essentially education line item, as Bob said, educate, incarcerate, medicate. The educate portion of that's about 60%. We should be proud of that. And so there's an opportunity there to come back to our roots and provide that resources for the local schools. But you need to know, because of the larger commodity economy and the agricultural sector and the declining price for corn and soybeans over the last year or two, that's going to hurt our overall state revenues. But we're a much more diverse economy than we have been in the past, so we're still seeing decent growth, but not the 6-8% that we've been seeing over the last 5 or 6. So keep that in mind. I think if we communicate about what those overall dollar figures are, keep consistent in the Capitol with that conversation, and be respectful but forceful about schools funding first, I think we've got a chance at success. If we let it drift till the end of the session, then I think those chances become less so. So we'll keep, our end of the bargain in the Senate. We'll pass the allowable growth as the law says, and hopefully get a willing partner on the other side of the table.
Yeah, there's a couple other things with the budget too. Our Medicaid increases, we're seeing more there. And our prison population, they anticipate significant growth within that. We just built a a new prison in Fort Madison for around $300 million. And there's a real concept of discussion going around, you know, are there ways that we can do things different within the corrections system? And we have really one of the better systems in the country. It's our community-based correction systems. We need to invest more dollars in that, keep people out of those penitentiaries and prisons, other than the violent behavior. You know, people, there are some, I've toured the prisons, I'm tell you what, there's people in there that belong in there. They're very dangerous. And so, but you know, we can be a little smarter within our corrections system. So, yeah, but Jeff pretty well laid out the budget. I know that the ag economy too plays a significant role in our state. When that doesn't do well, we tend to have some issues too, so.
But it's certainly not a gloom and doom scenario,
It's
and
not.
I don't like that frame of reference. It's manageable. Iowa still has one of the best budgets in the country, and we will continue to. We just need to be a better partner with the locals, like you here at the school district. And so hopefully we can just focus on that a little bit more, get back to the basics. I guess it's also important to know that we think that the governor is going to focus on the teacher leader program and the categorical funding. And so it would not surprise me to see him say 0 in supplemental state aid in his speech. That's basically when we all say, okay, here's the governor's priorities, and we won't know that till the first week of the session. But we're hearing that sounds like what the scenario is going to be. Maybe between now and then there'll be enough feedback that the supplemental state aid / allowable growth line item will have a couple percentage points in his speech. But we'll see. So I don't think it's gloom and doom. We could do all of our normal traditional decisions and still have a balanced budget with a surplus. And you know what? Those are all kind of decisions you make here locally too. What are your priorities and how you fit it into what's available? So it's not
We've
rocket
actually,
science.
since, well, I just saw the chart the other day, '07 we had a surplus. Every year since '07 and years past, you know, so we're.
With a 99% expenditure limitation under the law, you would basically be breaking the law if you didn't do it. And I haven't seen anybody get up and run a bill that says we're going to break the law. I've seen 11 of those debates, so you know we'll go through that process, and this is helpful to know what your priorities are and be supported. But it's going to take some work. There's no doubt about that.
You know, as we move forward, for us board members and for our stakeholders as community members, what is the best way for us to have our voice heard at the state level? I mean, on different issues like email the governor, or
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I've talked to you guys, but you know.
Well, you're lucky, because both Bob Kressig and Jeff Danielson are roommates with the education budget chair, Brian Shanejohn. So he hears regularly from us about our local community needs, especially around education. He's a
Make sure
teacher
you have
himself.
somebody.
He's a retired teacher. He went to the University of Northern Iowa. He has, you know, great respect and understanding about why the value of education in Iowa is important. So it's all about the facts as you know them and the ability to communicate in a rational way, right? You raise an issue about the Common Core, you raise an issue about whether the two sides can get along. That's, you know, if you're down there for the right reasons, that's what you should be doing. So use, you know, whatever established relationships you have, communicate, you know, with the facts as you know them from your perspective. And my experience has been reasonable people tend to come to the same conclusion. It's all the drama that confuses people, and I'm just kind of a no drama guy. Frankly, it gets a little tiring. So let those folks wear themselves out, and those are going to be back at the table trying to solve the problem are the ones that usually, you know, you can communicate with pretty effectively.
Well, and the other thing I would share too is that over the years I've seen how effective it is for groups to come down and talk about an issue to the legislature. And so the concept is that, well, you find the chair of the education budget, you know, and you talk to them. You talk to other key members in that. You talk to the local legislators, and then You know, if you're from another part of the state, you know, you're from Council Bluffs, you know. So I think that that interaction is really, really important. It's kind of face-to-face. Emails, you know, we'll get a couple hundred emails a day on an issue. And but I think that, and I've seen success with that. So I don't know if you want to bring all the school boards in Iowa to the Capitol on a day. I'm just saying that may be a good option to do. It's worked, other groups have done it. It has an influence.
And also, it's easy to say you don't know as a legislator, so I think you gotta take that first excuse away. You must do the education curve, and then after that, you can get into a little deeper, you know, questions and concepts. Now that you know that these are the needs that we have locally, what would you do, given that scenario? But you gotta get past that first step, which is, you know, I don't know. And then they can go back to their desk. So you gotta get past that step at least. You gotta go through the hard work of saying, here's the information, and then if they still wanna go a certain direction with it, then you've gotta kind of start counting votes and figure out. If you can get to 50% plus one, 26 votes in the Senate and 51 in the House. But we're here. I mean, we've got Bob and I who, I mean, I didn't have gray hairs when I showed up down there. Certainly have more now, but they're well earned. The work is worthwhile, and I think we've done some good things. We just need to get back and focus on K-12 again.
And I would, oh, go ahead.
I'm going to change the subject, so why don't you go ahead?
No, I was just going to take it a different direction too.
Okay, so, been reading a lot about the challenges the rural districts have and what's going on with their growth in the other direction. What would you say is the most significant potential policy conflict between, let's call them the more suburban and urban schools compared to the dilemma with the smaller?
I really think here's the biggest issue. You know, at one time Iowa had about 3,000 school districts. I think right now we're knocking on 300 or less.
Right around 300.
So we've consolidated and consolidated. And the real issue now we're seeing, there was just a recent, I don't even remember the towns, I just remember that the voters turned it down.
Mhm.
They didn't want to consolidate.
Right.
And so I think that's the one issue. The other one is transportation. You're hearing where kids are on the bus for over an hour and a half in some cases. And I think from an economic development perspective, some of your rural areas aren't really addressing how they can grow the education system. And people are, you know, Cedar Falls, I think we've benefited from, you know, growth out of some of the rural areas surrounding around here. And I think it's just going to continue. Southwest Iowa, if you haven't been down there, it's like a ghost town down there. I think one county down there, the total population is about 4,000 people in the whole county. I mean, the Western home's got, you know, they don't have 4,000, but you got about 1,000 people at the Western home. So, I mean, that gives you kind of perspective. And, you know, when I talk to some of those legislators from there, I ask them, well, what are you doing? What's the community doing? And I think, I don't know, I hate to say it's too late, but in some of those areas, I think it's going to be a challenge for them. You know, for entire school districts, 300 students.
Right.
You know, from K through 12, 300 students. It's pretty small.
So, first of all, the goal should be every Iowa child, no matter where you live, no matter who your parents are, gets equal opportunity access to a high-quality public education. That's the goal. It's actually constitutional. Any states that have tried to go away from that model end up right back at that model. So how do you manage the in-migration of, you know, the state of Iowa, basically from rural to urban? It's been going on for a while, and then if you want to extrapolate to the rest of the country, from certain parts of the country to other parts. Most of our ability to deal with that is already baked into the school funding formulas. And so there's not really a new debate to be had there. One of the things we try to do is look at, you know, the adjustments in the formulas. And if you don't do that as a state, you will probably not pass constitutional muster on equal opportunity and access tests. So we've done a fairly good job. Most of the pain, if you will, of that transformation has already unfolded over the last 20 years. We went from 600 plus school districts in the late 80s to 360 some now. And there's a well-known process if districts are struggling in certain areas for sharing and for other arrangements. The AEAs have actually helped with that process a lot. So not a lot of new policy thought to be had in that area, just the recognition that every one of those children, no matter where they live, or who the parents are, still have that equal opportunity access, and try to manage that as much as we can. On the flip side, I've always believed education and economic development go hand in hand. So we've tried to make sure that a lot of those smaller communities are revitalized, have economic opportunities. The Iowa Values Fund, the Vision Iowa process to make quality of life, no matter where you live in Iowa, a place where people want to live, work, and raise a family. So to me, you can't have a discussion about education without wrapping all those other issues around it. And if we get enough thoughtful people down there, I think we usually come up with a decent answer. It's just been a rough patch, I think, the last couple of years, with especially the K-12 funding formula. The idea that we could zero that out and still come out okay 10 or 15 years down the road, I think that'll come back to bite us. So we shouldn't be doing that.
And those small districts actually get negative funding from the year before.
Right, yeah. So there's a self-policing mechanism, if you will, on the financial side. It's painful.
You mentioned the school formula, the funding formula.
Yeah.
How has that changed, or is it ever tweaked?
We did, Senator Warrenstadt from Sioux City, I think either the second or last year that he was there as a senator, which would have been, I want to say 2010, 2009. In the one line item where the state tries to make up for the lack of property tax, we put some resources in there that year, but it's clearly not enough. And so it's always going to be a challenge. Those districts that are property tax poor, if you will, versus those that have the resources, we're always trying to strike that balance because of the goal. You know, no matter where that child lives, we should try to achieve the same quality outcome. And it's not easy.
Yeah,
But that was the last time we had a debate about that particular part of the formula.
We've gone from a property poor district to a property rich district in the last.
You know what, the Cedar Valley, this is why I don't buy the gloom and doom, and we shouldn't buy it here locally, you know. Our decisions don't warrant it at the state level. We've been very fiscally responsible. But this area was the second largest growing economy in Iowa by percentage. We were punching basements in the middle of the housing crisis because we didn't make those kind of loans. We've had a tremendous, what I like about being the senator from this area is that it doesn't matter whether it's the private sector, the nonprofit, or the public sector, we have leaders in every one of those areas in the Cedar Valley who all went through the farm crisis. And you know what? In the 80s, it wasn't real fun in this area. But they found a way through all of that to work together, to leverage their money. We were just at the Nonprofit Association at the end of last week, wasn't it, Friday or so? They're the wraparound services for all the things the rest of us can't provide. So I'm incredibly proud of our area for the kind of ability to leverage, if it's a state dollar, and get a better return than probably any other region, because we've got professionals in every one of those areas who figured that out. And we should toot our own horn, I think, a little more often.
Yeah, and I think too, you know, from an economic development perspective, we've, you know, we've got Target here. We've got they've got a system there where they can now refrigerate products to their stores, and it's one of the unique systems in the world for that. And we have the university here. UNI, I think, plays a significant role in our economic engine. I know what would this community look like without it? I mean, it would be drastically different. Those are things that I see important. The Tech Works is another area. I know it's been slow to unfold, but it's going to happen. Last year we got, for the metal castings lab, we got a 3D printer. That all those things all have impacts, economic impacts. And like Jeff said, the Cedar Valley has really done well. You know, we've received things from the state, but we've also made those grow and get better. And the industrial park in Cedar Falls, you know, I can remember when I was on P&Z that there really wasn't a whole lot in there. And now it's got well over 7,000 employees in that place. So all those things, I think, all fit together to make our community as strong as it is. You know, we just, but Deere had the layoff with about 460 employees, which is sad. You know, I worked there and had a layoff, but we made it through, and I think, you know, those folks will too, hopefully. So, you know, and it wasn't that long ago in the 80s, I remember the saying, we're the last person to leave water to turn on the lights. Dubuque had the same slogan, and so the lights are still on. We're still doing good, and hopefully that continues.
You know, I'm just going to kind of piggyback too, and thank you for those comments, that, as Jean said, how can we contact you? Likewise, we would certainly welcome any comments from you or any conversation, and please don't hesitate to contact any of us as well as you go through the legislative session.
Well, I've called you during the session, and
Yes, which is always appreciated.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Do you know who the Iowa Association of School Boards legislative liaison is going to be this year? Have they made that decision?
Not
I've heard
yet.
there's a transition. Is that true?
I
Yeah.
believe you're the
Okay.
transition, and I have not heard who that is.
That's very helpful if you could,
Yeah.
if you find out
We
who
will.
that's going to be, give us that
Yeah.
information.
Yeah, we'll pass that along. I'd be remiss without saying that Representative Rogers couldn't be here for the couple board meetings that we scheduled and looked at for this the last couple months. So he certainly busy individual and just couldn't be here. So I know he apologizes for that. But we can't thank you guys enough for all that you do as you represent not only our region but our district. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of difficult conversations and a lot of sleepless nights, there's no doubt, as you make these decisions. But again, the right decisions for all of us across the state. So,
all right.
We want to be better partners. This is going to be the year to do it, right?
Exactly.
And my boss is sitting back there.
She's a regular member.
I know she is. Yeah, all right.
He doesn't get a
Thank you.
choice.
Yeah.